here. Graziano, I'll start in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, is this a make or break season for the quarterback of the Eagles?
I think on some level it is, Greeny. I always look at the contract, and you look at his 2027 money. It's $22 million, but that's all that's guaranteed. After that, no guarantees. We already had the story come out earlier this offseason that seemed to indicate there was some dissatisfaction in the building with Jalen Hurts. I think if he has a bad year and the offense doesn't work, then they might be looking at other options this time next year.
We've seen them make surprising quarterback moves in the past, like drafting Jalen Hurts in the past. D. Wood, what do you think? The idea that Jalen, who took them to a Super Bowl championship just 16 months ago or so, should he be in a situation where he's sort of playing for his future in Philly, D. Wood?
You know, in most situations you would say no, but this is Philadelphia. Philadelphia, you know, they have high expectations. And listen, you got another year with another new offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion. This is going to be a totally different offense. And I think some of the pieces around Jalen Hurts is also dwindling down some. So I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a rebound year. Otherwise, he could be staring at that type of future.
All right, let's talk about another.
All right, let's talk about another what's dwindling down. Will you talk like where is it dwindling? Okay. There is a bunch to talk here. I've obviously made a bunch of Jalen Hurts deep dive videos recently and in discussing this, and so, you know, we're not going to jump into all the stats or the highlights like I did that over the weekend and, you know, last week and the week before and the week before and the week before that and the week before that. So I definitely want to just have a more general conversation. I always talk about sometimes we want to zoom in, sometimes we want to zoom out, sometimes we want to zoom in, sometimes we want to zoom out. To me, this discussion right here is definitely more of a zoom out discussion. At the core of it, I do think this is a make or break season. I remember after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and again as someone who has so many videos about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and defending him and doing all those deep dives, I came out and said that if Jalen Hurts and the Eagles do not win the Super Bowl this coming year and if there's any type of struggles, Jalen Hurts and Sirianni will be on the hot seat. And I remember talking to someone in the comments section, you know, shout out longtime friend who's always commenting, virtual friend Travis, you know, who's a big Eagles fan, was saying, you know, like that's crazy. There's no way that Jalen Hurts, you know, could be on the hot seat, see, etc. And I was like, this is just the way it works. Like this is just the way it is. And that is the story right now. Like that is the situation that Jalen Hurts and Sirianni for that matter find themselves. What always frustrates me though about this conversation is that people say like, oh, this is Philly. They always make crazy decisions like this, and it's like that's just so not true. It's just not true. And everyone, this is always circled back to Carson Wentz. They had Carson Wentz, obviously he's supposed to be their future and he plays unbelievable and gets injured, and then Nick Foss wins the Super Bowl and they still made sure that Nick Foss and company were there, like they still were like let's do this, but then Carson gets injured again and they still stick with Carson. Nick Foss was going to position them to win against the Saints. They end up losing, but you know, still pretty instantly having some success. A dramatic win over, I believe it was the Chicago Bears, that was like the triple doink or the double doink or however many doinks there were. And yet they were still sticking with Carson. And then Carson gets injured again in the playoffs where he gets concussed, I believe against the Seattle Seahawks. And like I don't know if it was that year or the following year, but it was a year when like he was throwing to no one. He had nothing. Like the team was an absolute mess. Everybody was injured. It was either everybody was injured or they just did a terrible job of building the team. I just remember there was like, I remember this was before I was even really watching Colin Cowherd like that, locked in on it. He kept saying that, you know, Carson's throwing to like, you know, like lawn tables and deck chairs or something. I remember he kept saying something like that, and I was like, yeah, like it's actually pretty remarkable what Carson Wentz was even able to remotely do. But again kept getting injured, and so now you have the opportunity to draft Jalen Hurts, and logically it makes sense because you have a quarterback that keeps getting injured. There were some issues in the locker room. I remember even like that. This is what really stood out to me when Z came out and said it's okay. I forget like how they got the sound bite of it, but he was pretty much like it's okay, bro, to take the check down, right? And it was like that was Z who because of Carson was able to set the record for the most receptions. I think it was like Carson was feeding Z, feeding him, feeding him, feeding him. And Z comes out and is like, it's okay. And I think maybe even Lane Johnson. And you're just kind of like, oh, like it was very clear to me that Carson wasn't the most loved player in the locker room. And I even saw that continue in Indianapolis. You saw it even on, Hard Knock. Like you could see it. You could see that when they scored touchdowns, the interactions, like you cowl. D just see that there's for whatever reason, it's just he's a little bit of an outsider. Unfortunately, that's the way it happens. Especially once you get tagged as that, you're always the scapegoat. And he was a scapegoat in Indianapolis. He was not the problem in Indy. And then the same thing in Washington with, Ron Rivera, whatever. Like Rivera, whatever it is. Well, Carson was also scapegoat and it's just like, not the whole story from my viewpoint. But despite all of that, the Philadelphia Eagles genuinely wanted to keep him. They absolutely I've emphasized this recently, but like we still keep confusing this. The Philadelphia Eagles, even with Jalen Hurts, absolutely positively were looking to keep Carson Wentz. No question about it. No question about it. So yet with all those ups and downs, the injuries, etc., they still wanted to roll with Carson. And so with Jalen Hurts, make or break. I do believe that's true. Does it make it so that they now are more aggressive in trying to draft a quarterback and then they have a little bit of a quarterback compet? Again, I'm not going to try to pretend like I know what it is, but the idea that they just fool and cut bait with Jalen, are they able to drive like what if they're able to drive a more serious bargain where they're like, Jalen, we still want you to be our quarterback, but like we're not paying you $60 million, we're not giving. You sum at that point, I guess what it'll be like $240 million, whatever the official number. It's like we're not giving you that type of contract. We're gonna give you like a 3-year $100 million contract where I don't know, I think I'm pretty good at kind of predicting and having these types of more like meta conversation, but in terms of like the actual contract negotiations itself zero idea, but I think that's where you're at. I don't think it's this automatic well if the offense struggles Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts is just done it's over. See you bye. And this is what I had said last season when we were really looking at it through the lens of Tanner McCoo and I had a whole video breaking down what Tanner McCoo is. And this is when we had technically even less information on Tanner McCoo. But I just kept saying like listen a lot of people that's when the momentum was really behind like hey maybe they should sit Carr bench Jalen and put in Tanner McCoo. And I said, listen, if Tyler McCoo is genuinely a great quarterback that like he's genuinely crushing it in practice, we saw what he did in the preseason game and all of that and it's just like, like if there's truth to that, if there's truth that like, hey, Tanner McCoo is actually like that dude, like Tyler McCoo is actually like a genuine, top starter in the NFL, then it's just like, well then, yeah, if they reach the conclusion that Jalen Hurts not good enough, well, then yeah, the Eagles have that and they will operate appropriately. And it's like we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that. And now there's an all-in on making sure that Jalen Hurts can be optimized and the coaching hire because I had another discussion with someone else in the comments section and they were just so wrong saying like nobody wants to work with the Eagles and that's why the Eagles had to interview 1 million people and it's like the Eagles were doing their due diligence. They hired exactly who they wanted to hire. People like well they didn't get Brian Daboll. They didn't get Mike McDaniel. It's like they wanted an experienced play caller and they didn't get one. They could have easily had an experienced play caller. There were 1 million other experienced play callers that they could have gotten. But because of their due diligence, because of their interviewing process, because of what they did, they were like, no, we're going to go with Sean Mannion because he fits. We believe that he has what we want. We believe in what he can do for Jalen Hurts and the offense. But like I've said this before, I said this with a couple of these other young quarterbacks, with like Brian Daboll and the Titans, and can't think of the other example. I think the Giants was another example that I used where it's like there's a difference between developing a quarterback and just getting an offense on track or even elevating an offense. Like they're kind of different paths. They're not mutually exclusive. Obviously there's plenty of overlap, but like for instance, like Kellen Moore was not really tasked with how do I make Jalen Hurts the best quarterback. Was how do I just orchestrate this, right? How do I conduct this orchestra? How do I choreograph this offense in a way that's successful? Really nothing to do with maximizing Jalen Hurts, putting him in positions to succeed, of course, but it's not like how do we get the absolute best version out of Jalen. That was not the agenda. Whereas Sean Manion's, it is like the development of Jalen Hurts, right? And that's not what, Kevin Pulo, I'm already forgetting his name. Kevin Pulo, like that was not what his job was either, to be like we're going to maximize Jalen Hurts. That guy I don't know what his job was, because it wasn't making the offense great either, but it certainly was not developing Jalen Hurts at all. And make no mistake about it, no matter whether you're a Super Bowl MVP, whether you're a regular season MVP, whether you're a Hall of Famer, you still need to be developed. There's still plenty of room to grow. Tom Brady himself, after playing 10+ years in the NBA. That'd be pretty cool. In the NFL, he was still saying, I'm still learning. Because I remember I ripped Micah Parsons a couple years ago, who said, I've seen everything. And I said, really? You've seen everything? It took 10+ years for Tom Brady to still be seeing new things. But you apparently, in like year 3 or whatever it was, you apparently have seen everything already. Like that's impressive. I remember making a whole video about it, of just like the absurdity of a statement like that. So make no mistake about it, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, there's still plenty of development, plenty to learn and grow and evolve. And the Eagles have not had that emphasis. Now they do with Sean Mannion. So it is a make or break year to me in the sense of seeing the development, seeing the growth. It's not make or break, you better lead this team back to a Super Bowl, back to the promised land. It's like you want to see the growth. You want to see the development. You want to have the sense that Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback this year than last year. And I got news for you. I think Jalen Hurts was a better quarterback this last year than he was in the Super Bowl year. I was actually incredibly impressed with a ton of games. And we started off from the jump week 1. I remember watching week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys and I was like, I am watching a more comfortable, more confident Jalen Hurts right now. I am watching a better operator of the offense. And people will say, oh, but we had entire halves where we did nothing and the 3 and outs and this, and it's like you just can lump that. If that was truly a Jalen Hurts problem, if that was inherent to Jalen Hurts, then we would have seen those problems from the moment he became a quarterback in the NFL. And we never did. We never saw those problems. We only saw them with Kevin Patchelo in 2025. So to automatically make that as an inherent identity of Jalen Hurts makes no logical sense whatsoever. And so apparently, since we want to use all anonymous sources of like, oh, people don't like Jalen Hurts and he has a problem with being coached. Well, there's also reports now that him and Sean Mannion have completely hit it off. Do you hear them talking about it? Do you hear it? I don't hear it. I don't hear them saying. Reports say that Sean Mannion and Jalen Hurts are hitting it off tremendously, that they really like each other and they really see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, and Jalen Hurts is excited to get to work. I don't hear them talking about that. I'm not seeing 20-minute videos of them breaking down that at all. I don't hear anyone talking about. I hear myself talking about it. I'm talking about it, but I don't hear anyone else talking about it. I heard, oh, he didn't get along with this coach and that coach, and oh, there's all these problems, says anonymous sources. What about any of the positives? Do you hear them? Do you hear any of the breakdowns? Hear any of the conversations? No. Okay. So, yeah, it's a make or break in the sense of AR. EU a better quarterback? Do we see an evolution of Jalen Hurts' game? Are you better this year than you were last year? That to me is a make or break. If it's just the same, if it's just like, okay, this is just kind of what it's been. I find that I'll find that a little problematic personally, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden that means like Jalen Hurts is now like out of Philadelphia. I think, if you're Roseman, then you start to consider what the other options are. Maybe it's some of the quarterbacks are that they've already drafted. Maybe it's, obviously we'll have no idea. We don't know in this moment time of how next season unfolds. But that's also thing. Let's say the season ends up being a disaster. I'm not predicting that, but let's just say it is. Let's just say it's an absolute disaster. Everything just falls apart. It's not even Jalen Hurts' fault, right? Let's actually just give it like one of the most weirdly specific scenarios. It's not even Jalen Hurts' fault. The O-line is a mess. The defense, they just have cluster injuries and it's just not good enough, right? And they just lose. Now they have a top 10 pick in apparently an incredibly healthy quarterback draft class, and it's like do they draft potentially their next quarterback of the future rookie deal etc., right? Like it's an interesting conversation, and again I'm not saying it's one direction or the not or which dire tie-in it should be, but it is the business of the NFL. But let's just say in a different scenario where they come up short, they don't win the Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts is also not the problem. And now they have the I don't know, they have a pick in the 20s or whatever, so they're not going to be able to get a top quarterback. And it's like, what's the story here? And it's just like that's when I think maybe there's potentially a harder ball that is played with contract negotiations and, restructuring. And it's like, give you a 2-year extension of 90 $45 million a year or something. And it's just like we're going to continue just to build the best possible roster we possibly can, like whatever it may be, because we still can win with you. We believe in you, but where we are we're not giving you this 4-year $240 million extension. Like it's just I think a lot of options are on the table, and it all depends on which options the Eagles are actually, in reaching distance of. Does the next season end up being a disaster? And so now they have a top 8 pick or something like that. Again, it's all of it is possible and they get that pick. The Patriots pick, right? We're not even factoring that. The Patriots pick trading A.J. Brown, that first round pick, it's kind of confusing whether it's going to be 27 or 28. Who really knows? But like that pick maybe ends up being like a great pick in its league. Cool, okay. They can draft alike, you just don't know. You just don't know. I do believe, although I said that I think it's a little bit overblown of like how much the Eagles make these cutthroat moves on a spectrum like that they're not the Dallas Cowboys when they're just like we're just going to keep doing the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again, like they're not there to play those games. They're not there to do what the Giants have done, what the Commanders have done, what the pretty much their entire division has done. Like they're not there to do that. They're not there to like or do the things that like the Cleveland Browns have done or the Denver Broncos Knicks, where they're just like we're just trying like any quarterback we can, like we'll try this 5th round quarterback, like maybe he's got a little juice to him, like it's like no, if they're going to start him it's like because they truly believe that this is like the genuine quarterback of the they're making moves. That is what the Philadelphia Eagles have always done, even if they always haven't worked. Like they've always understood the importance of the quarterback position, and even understood the importance, like they essentially begged Nick Foss to come to Philadelphia, and that ultimately led them to a Super Bowl. Like that is the vision that they had and the understanding of what they need. They have always understood that, which is why they drafted Jalen Hurts when they did as well, right? So, it's just like it is what makes this whole situation very interesting, very dynamic, and a moving target. It is absolutely a moving target. And yeah, I think that's the more honest discussion about this whole thing. And again, coming from someone who obviously has spoken, incredibly positively and has defended Jalen Hurts every step of the way, which I obviously all believe in, but I also believe in that things change quick and movement happens quick. And again, I'm not saying it's what I would do. It's not saying what I want or anything like that. It's just the nature of how these things go. And it's going to be really fascinating to see. I personally believe that Jalen Hurts is going to have an awesome year with Sean Mannion. I'm incredibly excited to see Jalen Hurts actually operate within a system. I really at first was like, Sean Mannion what? And then the more and more I think about it, the more and more I learn about it, the more and more excited I get. And so I believe as long as they don't have their own cluster injuries and the O-line's not a mess and they can actually do the things that they want to do, as long as they have the ability to actually execute the offense that they're looking to execute, I think Jalen Hurts is going to have an awesome year and the Philadelphia Eagles' offense is going to be awesome. I do believe that. I think if anything, the most unsettling thing is going to be the idea that this offense is going to be great, legit, or you're going to see the best version of Jalen Hurts and then you have the potential of losing Sean Mannion. I think that is more likely to be the conversation than is it time to move on from Jalen Hurts. So either way it's going to be a really fun and interesting year of Philadelphia Eagles conversations with of course Jalen Hurts right in the center. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts? Do you think this is a make or break season for Jalen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get to some discussions. Let's get to some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.